Everything begins in the mind. Before the skyscraper touches the sky, it lives in the mind of the architect. Before the book is written, the story unfolds in the mind of the writer. Before the life you desire becomes real, it must first be conceived in the landscape of your thinking. The world around you is a mirror, quietly reflecting what you consistently think about, believe, and allow to take root in your mental environment. You don't get the life you want, you get the life your thoughts are willing to allow. Now, that might sound like a big claim, but take a moment and consider how often you think the same things day in and day out. Thoughts like, I'm not good enough, nothing ever works for me, or I don't have what it takes. What happens to a person who lives with those ideas swirling through their head, unchecked, unchallenged, unquestioned? They begin to build a life to match that internal narrative. The bricks of action are laid according to the blueprint of belief. The moment you understand this, your life begins to pivot, because you no longer wait for your circumstances to change. You start by changing the script in your mind. You begin to treat your thoughts with the same seriousness as an architect treats the design of a building. Because you realize that if the mental design is faulty, the structure will be fragile, the roof will leak, the walls will crack, and your life will look like a construction site of excuses instead of a completed masterpiece of intention. Thoughts are not harmless. They are not abstract decorations of the mind. They are the seeds of reality. Plant a thought and you grow a belief. Repeat the belief and it shapes your attitude. Let that attitude guide you and it forms your behavior. Stick with that behavior and it sculpts your habits. And in time, your habits become your character. Your character becomes your destiny. It all begins with a single thought. Now, let's bring this closer to home. Think back to any success you've had, big or small. Maybe it was a goal you reached, a challenge you overcame, a fear you pushed through. Before it happened, you probably had a thought that said, maybe I can do this. It might have been a quiet thought, even a doubtful one. But it was different from the usual noise. That little shift, that slight deviation in thinking, is what opened the door for action. And once you opened the door, momentum did the rest. Your life today is largely the result of yesterday's thinking. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow will belong to the thoughts you're thinking right now. This should excite you because it means you're not stuck. You're not cemented in your past mistakes or your family history or even your current conditions. You can redraw the map. You can revise the blueprint. You can literally re-architect your life by choosing different thoughts. The problem is we often underestimate just how much power a thought holds. We treat it like it's passing weather. But thoughts, especially repeated ones, aren't clouds. They're construction crews. They're either building the future you want or reinforcing the past you're trying to escape. And here's the truth, the mind will build something, always. It's never neutral. The question is, what is it building for you? If you constantly feed it fear, doubt, and regret, it will construct walls. Walls that keep opportunities out and lock your potential in. But if you give it hope, discipline, and vision, it will build doors that open into new seasons of growth, new levels of achievement, new realms of possibility. This is why guarding your mind is not just a nice idea, it's a life strategy. Just like an architect doesn't let just anyone add lines to the blueprint, you can't afford to let just anyone or anything shape your thinking. What you watch, who you listen to, the conversations you entertain, they all influence the design. And if you don't control the input, you will live with the output. The greatest shift in a person's life doesn't usually begin with a big external breakthrough. It starts with a quiet internal one. A change in philosophy, a new perspective, a rethinking of old beliefs that no longer serve you. It's the moment you say, I don't have to think this way anymore, and actually mean it. Because when you change how you think, you change how you feel. When you change how you feel, you change what you do. And what you consistently do, that's what builds your life. You see, your mind is more than a tool. It's a workshop. And every thought is a tool or a trap. Some thoughts build, others break. Some inspire, others injure. And the moment you become intentional about what you allow in that workshop, you start producing different results outside of it. There are people who are waiting for everything outside to change so they can finally feel good on the inside. But the most powerful lives are built in reverse. Change inside first, then watch how quickly the outside catches up. Because if you change your thoughts, you change everything. You can't live a positive life with a negative mind. There's a law at work in life that many overlook, and yet it governs so much of what we experience. You cannot sow thorns and expect roses. You can't plant poison and hope for fruit. And in the same way, you can't fill your mind with negativity and expect your life to bloom with positivity. It just doesn't work that way. Some people wonder why their life seems stuck in a cycle of problems, frustration, and disappointment, and yet, when you step into their world and listen for just a moment, you hear the story loud and clear, not in their circumstances, but in their conversations. You hear it in how they talk about their day, their work, their relationships, their dreams. It's all colored by a mind that's been rehearsing limitation, rejection, scarcity, and fear, and the result? A life that reflects exactly what's been going on in the theater of their thoughts. See, the mind is not a silent passenger. It's the steering wheel. It's not just something you carry around. It's what determines where you go and how far you get. If the mind is filled with criticism, doubt, and bitterness, it will steer you toward isolation, failure, and regret. If it's filled with hope, purpose, and gratitude, it will carry you into new opportunities, stronger relationships, and greater peace. Your life is the evidence of your thinking, not your potential. Everyone has potential, but your mind is what gives that potential direction or denies it momentum. Let me tell you something simple but powerful. You can't outlive your mindset. No matter how hard you work, how much you hustle, how many books you read, if your mind is constantly running the old program of I'm not enough, or life is against me, or it never works out, you will sabotage your own progress without even knowing it. You will take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because your thoughts didn't allow you to believe in a better outcome long enough to see it. It's easy to talk about being positive, but let's not confuse that with being naive. A positive mind isn't blind to problems. It simply refuses to let the problems become the loudest voice in the room. It doesn't ignore difficulty. It chooses to focus on possibility. A negative mind, on the other hand, magnifies everything wrong until it becomes impossible to see what's right. It takes a bad 5 minutes and turns it into a bad day. Then it calls it a bad week, and eventually labels it a bad life. That's why managing your thoughts is more than a self-help idea. It's emotional survival. If you let every setback convince you that you're cursed, if you let every closed door convince you that you're unworthy, you'll stop knocking altogether. You'll talk yourself out of trying before life ever gets a chance to bless you. And the real tragedy, you'll start to think your life is the problem when it was only ever your mind. Think of your mind as the thermostat of your life. It sets the temperature. You can decorate the house, bring in beautiful furniture, buy the best technology, but if the thermostat is set to cold, everything will feel uncomfortable, no matter how nice the surroundings are. If it's set to negative, no matter what positive event happens, it won't last. You'll find a way to doubt it, criticize it, or downplay it. That's the nature of a negative mind. It will always resist a positive life. People try to upgrade their life without upgrading their mindset, and then they wonder why nothing changes. But the truth is, transformation isn't about what's around you. It's about what's within you. A new job won't fix a bitter mindset. A new relationship won't cure insecurity. More money won't silence scarcity thinking. You have to do the inner work to get the outer results. You have to filter what you allow into your mind, because it's not just passing through, it's planting something. You can have 1,000 great intentions, but if they're filtered through a negative mind, they lose power. Negativity is like static. It distorts the message. It blocks the signal. It keeps you from hearing clearly and seeing fully. It makes you defensive when you should be open, angry when you should be curious, hopeless when you should be determined. And slowly, it steals your energy not all at once, but drip by drip, thought by thought. Now, nobody wakes up and says, I think I'll sabotage my own happiness today. But if you're not intentional about what you feed your mind, you're already doing it. Because the world is loud. Social media is loud. Fear is loud, but peace is quiet. Growth is quiet. Wisdom is quiet. If you don't create space for those things, the noise of negativity will dominate the soundtrack of your life. You can't live a positive life on accident. It takes awareness. It takes discipline. It takes you deciding that your mind is too valuable to rent out to destructive thinking. Because everything you want to build a healthier life, stronger relationships, greater success depends on the quality of your thoughts. Not the weather, not the news, not your neighbor, your thoughts. That's where the work begins. Change begins when you take responsibility for your thinking. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must confront the mirror, not the one on the wall, but the one in the mind. It's that inner reflection that asks the hard questions. Why do I think the way I think? Who planted these thoughts? Why have I let them grow unchecked for so long? You see, real change doesn't begin when circumstances improve or when luck finally turns your way. It begins the moment you accept full responsibility for what's been living in your mind. It's easy to blame. It's easy to point outward. My parents didn't support me. My environment wasn't ideal. My boss doesn't see my potential. The economy is rough. All of these may be true, but none of them explain why someone else, facing the same conditions, finds a way to rise while another remains stuck. The answer is not always in the situation. It's in the interpretation, and your interpretation is shaped by your thinking. If you want to change your life, you've got to own your mind. Now, responsibility doesn't mean blame. It means ownership. It means recognizing that while you didn't choose every experience in life, you are still the gatekeeper of how those experiences affect your thinking. Someone may have planted the seed of doubt, but only you can keep watering it. Someone may have told you that you weren't good enough, but only you can keep repeating it. The day you take responsibility for your thoughts is the day you take back your power. Think of the mind like a lens. Whatever is on that lens is how you see the world. If it's scratched with fear, everything looks threatening. If it's smudged with resentment, every opportunity feels unfair. If it's fogged up with limiting beliefs, every dream feels too far away. But if you clean that lens, if you take responsibility for the fingerprints you've allowed to remain there, suddenly the world looks different. Not because the world changed, but because the lens did. So many people wait for outside forces to make them feel better. They say things like, if only they would apologize, or if only I got that opportunity, or if only someone believed in me. But waiting for external validation is like trying to light a fire with wet matches. Change doesn't come from waiting. It comes from deciding. You decide what thoughts stay and what thoughts go. You decide what gets your focus and what gets filtered out. That is your responsibility. No one else can do that work for you. Some people live their whole lives like passengers, never realizing they're sitting in the driver's seat. They hand over the steering wheel to old memories, painful moments, and people who no longer play a role in their lives. They give away control and then wonder why they feel directionless. But the moment you say, I'm responsible for how I think, and that thinking is shaping my life, you switch seats. You become the driver, and when the driver changes, so does the destination. Responsibility is uncomfortable at first. It feels easier to blame, but what you trade in comfort, you gain in freedom. Because once you take responsibility, you're no longer waiting for the world to change. You're becoming the change. You no longer say, that's just how I think, as if your mind is permanent cement. You say, that's how I used to think, but I've learned better. Growth begins not in changing others, but in changing the story you've been telling yourself. What's remarkable is how quickly things begin to shift once you take ownership of your thinking. You start noticing the patterns. You realize how often you talk yourself out of something before life even gets a chance to test you. You catch yourself expecting the worst and ask, why am I rehearsing failure instead of preparing for success? You notice how often you've been focusing on what you can't control instead of sharpening what you can. And here's what happens: the more responsibility you take, the more clarity you gain. You begin to separate your identity from your history. You begin to understand that while pain may have shaped your perspective, it doesn't have to own your future. Responsibility gives you the authority to rewrite the narrative, to reframe the loss, to rebuild the foundation, and to do it all from the inside out. It's a powerful moment when a person stops saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and starts saying, "What can I learn from this?" That shift, subtle yet seismic, is the beginning of all real transformation, because it pulls you out of the role of victim and places you in the role of creator. Creators don't deny difficulty, they decide how they will respond to it. They don't ignore pain, they grow from it. And most importantly, they don't wait for life to give them permission to think differently. They take it. They claim it. And once you've taken responsibility for your thinking, something else changes. You become more compassionate, not just toward others, but toward yourself. You start to see that many of the negative thoughts you've carried were never really yours to begin with. They were echoes of someone else's fear, someone else's limitation, and yet you held on to them like they were gospel. But now you get to decide what stays. Now you get to choose which thoughts deserve a place in your future. Because now you've taken responsibility, and in doing so, you've opened the door to something far greater than blame could ever offer. The mind is a garden. You choose what grows. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a piece of land, not just any land, but fertile, powerful, and always working. It never stops, and like all soil, it doesn't care what you plant. It will return whatever you sow. If you plant weeds, it won't object. If you plant roses, it won't celebrate. It simply grows whatever seed it's given. That's the power and the danger, because while your mind is capable of producing beauty, success, and peace, it's just as capable of producing fear, bitterness, and regret. The harvest always depends on the seed. We often go through life without paying much attention to the thoughts we're planting. We let fear slip in. We let doubt take root. We allow criticism, both from ourselves and others, to become a regular part of our inner dialogue. And we wonder why joy is scarce, why opportunities seem distant, why peace feels like a stranger, but the answer isn't out there. It's in the soil. It's in what's been planted and nurtured day after day, often unconsciously. You can't keep watering thoughts of failure and then complain when confidence doesn't show up. You can't let discouragement grow unchecked and expect hope to bloom. Life doesn't work that way. The mind, like a garden, reflects what you've consistently fed it. It thrives on routine. If you feed it negativity, it gets better at producing it. If you feed it truth, wisdom, and faith, it will start turning those thoughts into actions, attitudes, and habits. Now, every gardener knows something about weeds. You don't have to plant them, they show up on their own. Uninvited, unwelcome, persistent. That's how negative thoughts operate. You don't have to ask for insecurity. You don't have to schedule a worry session. They find their way in naturally through fear, comparison, bad experiences, or careless words spoken long ago. But if you do nothing, they take over. A good garden doesn't grow by accident. It grows because someone decided to pull the weeds and plant with purpose. What most people do is this: they complain about the weeds, but they don't remove them. They talk about wanting peace, but they don't stop rehearsing stress. They say they want growth, but they keep feeding old narratives of lack and limitation. You can't have both. You can't nurture poison and expect fruit. You have to choose deliberately, daily, and without apology. And here's what's powerful about that choice. Every thought you plant is a vote for your future. A single thought may seem small, but over time it builds momentum. Think a fearful thought once, it passes. Think it every day, it becomes a belief. And once it's a belief, it shapes your reality. But the same is true for thoughts of discipline, gratitude, and courage. Repeat them long enough and they don't just inspire you. They become the structure of who you are. The difference between a mind in chaos and a mind at peace is not found in intelligence. It's found in awareness. The person who pays attention to what they allow in their mental garden is far more equipped than the one who leaves it unguarded. Because every conversation, every piece of media, every relationship, it all drops something into your soil. Some drop seeds of encouragement, challenge, and vision. Others drop confusion, distraction, and doubt. The wise person observes. They ask, "Is this worth planting?" Because they know whatever goes in will eventually come out. No garden grows overnight. That's where patience comes in. You can't plant a new thought today and expect a harvest by tomorrow morning. But if you stay consistent, if you choose to nurture what's good and pull what's toxic, you'll look up one day and see that your thinking has shifted. Your language has changed, your energy is different, not because the world gave you something new, but because you changed what was growing inside you. Think of how a gardener works. They wake up early, they water the plants, they pull the weeds, they tend to what matters. And they do it whether it's raining or shining, because they understand something many people forget. Growth is not a one-time event. It's a daily decision. It's choosing what gets to stay and what has to go. It's recognizing that your environment may be chaotic, but your inner world doesn't have to be. Some people fill their mind with the news and wonder why they're anxious. Others fill their mind with gossip and wonder why they're bitter. But there are also those who read books that challenge them, listen to words that build them, surround themselves with people who stretch them, and slowly their internal garden transforms. Not because life became easier, but because they became better gardeners. There will always be weeds. There will always be noise, but the person who takes ownership of their mental soil learns how to guard the gate. They don't let everything in. They become selective, not because they're blind to the world, but because they understand their future depends on what they allow to grow. Conclusion: when it's all said and done, the greatest transformation you will ever experience won't begin with your circumstances, your environment, or even your relationships. It will begin with a decision, a quiet, internal shift to take back control of your thoughts, because once the thinking changes, everything else follows. The words you speak begin to align with truth, the choices you make begin to reflect confidence, the actions you take begin to carry purpose. And your life begins to echo the strength and clarity that started in your mind. No one builds a strong life on weak thoughts. And no one unlocks their potential by rehearsing their limitations. You have within you the ability to create, to overcome, to grow, and to lead. But that power is waiting on your permission. It's waiting on your willingness to uproot the old patterns, the war, now doubts, and the second-hand fears you've carried for too long. It's waiting on you to become intentional about what you allow to grow in the garden of your mind. So if you want your life to rise, start with your thinking. If you want peace, start with your thinking. If you want purpose, progress, and possibility, start with your thinking. Because when the mind is aligned, when it's clean, focused, and fueled with truth, everything begins to shift. Not instantly, but undeniably, you become the author instead of the echo. You start responding instead of reacting. And most of all, you realize this: your mind was never the problem. It was simply waiting for new instructions. Change your thoughts, and you truly do change everything.